Um, if it's, I mean, that's what I do. I'm a facilitator, so I'm always thinking about how to ensure that we create an atmosphere where people feel um, like it's an intimate setting. And I guess I've been practicing over several months now and continuing to refine and finesse it. But what I find it's almost like, you know how it is sometimes when you're on the phone conversation with someone, and sometimes that you can have a more intimate conversation on the phone
Hmm.
than when you're in person, like, or on the, because it's the immediacy of the voice and you don't have all the other stuff going on.
Sure, sure, yeah.
So it's a little bit like that in a weird way with video. It can be where, everyone's just kind of, um, you don't have all the other stuff happening, if that makes sense.
Well, I'm sure that people get hired to be facilitators and such, and I'm sure it's a skill that they've discovered quickly that it's almost an additional skill of a facilitator that we're in a Zoom world. It's like, can you facilitate a Zoom meeting? And I maybe not all facilitators made that transition well, but if you did, you would hopefully be in higher demand.
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen it not. I've seen professionals not make the transition as well.
Right. I've facilitated a lot of meetings and such, and yeah, I probably my multitasking, which I won't be doing here, you have my full
Mhm.
attention. Although I have to adjust a few things, but yeah, it's tricky. You've got to be on, so you have to focus in that respect.
Yeah.
We got just a couple more minutes here. We can get started probably a minute or so earlier. And so how's it just going in California? I've my friends in San Francisco. There's no wildfire threat at the moment, but is that an issue? Like I know it
Um,
was a warning.
I haven't heard anything. Um, so I don't think anything's happening.
Okay, well, good.
I've noticed that literally it's very hazy today, and I'm having a little bit of like PTSD because it literally looks kind of like it did when there was a lot of smoke. But I don't think that's what's happening.
We've had one day of rain in like 8 weeks, or even maybe longer here in Tucson. Like literally one day, and it wasn't much rain at all. And so there's supposed to be rain tomorrow, and everyone's just like,
Mhm.
um, sunny weather's delightful, but we would like some rain once in a while.
Yeah, it's scary, when the rain isn't happening. That's a big deal.
Okay. Okay, I think we can get started if you're ready. I'm going to go, and like I said, they're going to transition to the episode, but I will see you on the other side. And again, I'm just going to be an awkward kind of minute here. I'm sitting here. It's all
Mhm.
according to plan, but I will see you on the other side.
Okay, sounds good.
Hey, adapters, welcome back. Today, our guest is Dr. Renee Lertzman. Dr. Lertzman is a renowned psychologist, author, and sustainability strategist who uses psychological insights to change our approach to the environmental crisis. She is the founder of Project Inside Out, a unique resource hub that brings together activists and clinical psychologists to drive sustainable behavior for our planet. Dr. Lertzman shares how to practically apply psychology to climate and sustainability campaigns. She helps us understand the importance and value of emotional intelligence in our environmental work, and she will discuss practical strategies and tools that will transform the way people feel about the climate process. climate crisis. Hi, Dr. Lertzman. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Well, it's always a treat to talk to you, and I'm glad we got you here on Simpatico. But I think it's important maybe just to start with the baseline. You are a psychologist, but how did you get involved with climate and environmental issues?
Oh gosh. Well, it started for me when I was an undergraduate and I was certain I was going to be a psychologist. And I was one of those people that, knew since I was a kid that I was wanted to be a psychologist when I grew up. So I was, doing my major at college, and then I happened to take an environmental studies class. And that's what really turned my world upside down because I had such a profound experience as I was learning about the variety of environmental issues, including climate change. And I was struck by the lack of acknowledgement inside and within the environmental community and class I was taking. But also, when I would go to my psychology classes, there was no acknowledgement at the time or recognition of the impact that, becoming more aware of the scale and magnitude of our ecological and climate crisis has on us. And what does that mean? And how do we kind of make sense of who we are as humans? And how do we how do we do what we do differently? There was very little attention at the time. And so for me, these realms have never, ever felt separate. They feel absolutely integral. And I continue to experience that in my day-to-day experience.
So, why exactly is emotional intelligence important in our environmental work?
Because environmental work is emotionally charged, period. So it's almost as simple as that. It's if we think about the fact that when we talk about environmental issues and crises and climate threats through the lens of information, data, events that are emotionally charged, and I mean that very broadly, can bring up a whole variety of responses simultaneously, whether it's anxiety or fear or whatever that might be. If we just take that as a given and accept that that's the situation, which I would maintain it is, then I think it forces us to look at our work through the lens of how do we then communicate, engage, educate, lobby, do all the various things, innovate, that we're needing to do to address these crises through the lens of what we know about emotionally charged issues and threats. And as it happens, there's actually a tremendous amount that we know. We, speaking as humans in this moment in time, December 2020, that we know about the human psyche. And I don't mean individuals only, I mean as societies, as collectives, as cultures, that there's a tremendous amount that we know about how humans deal with stress, how humans process challenging and complicated information, how we tend to go into a fight, flight, freeze mode. How, if you want to go in the neurological level, there's a lot that we know about how we process information and the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala. And, there's just so much that we know right now that is available to leverage and to harness in the context of doing our environmental and climate work.
All right, so mine understand. You're probably in huge demand right now. Maybe you don't agree completely with that, but it's an emerging area. But what's really the lay of the land? If you think about environmental activists, environmental movement, and such, what's going out there? Are they aware of sort of what you're doing, and this is a field and an area and a concern that they should be focusing on?
Oh gosh, well, it's a very dynamic, evolving field, and it's incredibly exciting right now. So I've been doing this for, gosh, I mean, it's been since the late 1980s that I started writing and thinking and speaking and studying on this intersection. And fast forward to more recent years, the field is just, it's kind of exploding. And that's a really, really good thing. That's incredibly positive. So, yes, I am more in demand than ever, and I think it's only going to increase. And there are others now coming into the fray. I have lots of colleagues and partners and collaborators around the world who are starting to really look at how do we bring this work into our climate and environmental practice. So it's cutting edge stuff. I get emails from people every week. I get a lot of emails from young people, from students who are saying, Dr. Lertzman, I want to do, I want to get more into this field. How do I do it? And the exciting thing is that there's a lot of opportunity right now because there's more and more recognition. So, if I was doing a presentation and showing you a slide, one of the things I start my talks with is I show a random sampling of headlines that have come out only since the spring, the summer, that are explicitly talking about climate anxiety or grief or eco anxiety or all of that. That's actually a really good thing. It's starting to be named and acknowledged. There's research papers, peer-reviewed papers in Nature, in Scientific America, and the Lancet just came out with a study a week or two ago where scientists are starting to really come together and say, look, climate change has a mental health dimension to it. And what are we going to do about that as a profession and as a field of practice? So I see that there's a shift. Is the shift happening as fast as it needs to? I would say no. Do I still see a lot of climate environmental groups who are still in this kind of what I would say a outmoded, dated way of doing what they do? Yes. And what that means is a reliance on educating people and talking about raising awareness all the time. It's like, please, we've got to get past this kind of awareness raising mantra. It's like we have been raising awareness for 20 years and look what happens. People are paralyzed and triggered and overwhelmed. So, and it doesn't mean that we then only have to focus on the solutions either, which is the other end of the spectrum where, we don't want to depress anyone or overwhelm anyone. So we should only focus on positive solutions. And here's what you can do. And here's what we can do. And that's what I call the cheerleader. So we see that happening, but I, at the same time, I do see an evolution in insight, sophistication, understanding that is, undeniably happening. I'm always going to be that one who says, kind of a little bit of an agitator to say, we can do better, we can do more, come on, let's get on with it. But it is actually really, there's a lot of really positive things happening.
Well, it occurred to me, and I'm thinking of the work that I'm familiar with what you're doing. You work with groups and organizations, and so the idea of climate grief and climate anxiety, and it'd be great if you could speak to that too. But it occurred to me that are you also encouraging that when people think about psychologists or even therapists and such, it's a one-on-one, but when we head into this, we're in this climate crisis. Do you feel like the field of psychology in general is changing that? Down to that level that most psychologists should be thinking about environmental anxiety, and because and correct me if I'm wrong, because you're working with groups now, it's a chance for you to kind of get your message out to as many people as possible, but down to that individual, your local psychologists that you're working with, are they thinking about these topics that you're talking about?
Right. So they're starting to. When we talk about the psychological aspects of climate environmental work, it can take so many different expressions and applications, all the way to, frankly, I was just in a conference with psychotherapists, psychoanalysts last weekend, where they're actively asking questions like, what does this mean for me as a psychotherapist? Is it okay to bring up these topics? How do I engage with people on these issues? So there's at that level people who have private practice who are starting to really take this on board. There's a phrase that's being used called climate aware psychotherapists. And there are networks that are starting to develop. There's the Climate Psychology Alliance, which started in the UK, has a North America branch. There's the people who are starting to explicitly call themselves climate psychologists. There's colleagues like Leslie Davenport. There's Caroline Hickman. There's Jeff Keel. There's a number of therapists who are starting to use that kind of title and that name, all the way to people like myself who I don't work with individuals. I am not a clinician. I am actually an organizational change management consultant, if you want to think of it that way. Or I basically work with organizations on how to adapt and integrate sustainable and environmental practices and policies, whether it's engaging with employees across a multinational organization, whether it's engaging with a board, with shareholders, with supply chain stuff. So, I consider all of that work inherently psychological, because we're having to deal with people's emotional relationship with change, right? So it's really about, inviting people that we work with into a context where we can look at what the current situation is and what the current reality is, and chart a course together towards finding solutions and ways through that. But again, because the domain we're working in is triggering and complicated, it makes that kind of change work harder than other kinds of change work where it might be a bit more straightforward. Like, we've got this problem and now we got to solve it. So I consider that psychology, but it may not look very psychological in terms of what we think of as, doing therapy with people. What I find is working at the organizational level, when you create spaces and context for people to talk honestly and openly about how they are feeling about climate crisis and about environmental issues, and whatever anxieties, ambivalence might come up, as well as aspirations to be part of the solution and do something different, I find that in itself can be quite transformational. And I draw on my training and my skills to promote the forums and the context to have those kinds of conversations.
So when you're talking to these groups, I mean, probably one of the earliest conversations is just, demonstrating how does psychology sort of offer unique insights to the environmental work that they're doing. What is that conversation? Because, they come in, and what are you saying to them, I guess, early on in that process?
Well, I say a few things. So the first thing I start with, how are you? and where are you at right now, honestly? Honestly, if you really, in terms of the work you're doing and the experience you're having, trying to move change through an organization or with consumers or stakeholders, whatever. So we talk about the frustration, the overwhelm, the impatience, all of that gets kind of named and put out on the table. And then, pretty quickly we get into working with, what do you imagine the people that you're wanting to be engaging and working with, how do you think they might be feeling right now? And really putting ourselves more in the shoes of our stakeholders. Especially, I work with, let's say, groups that are trying to promote, let's say, electrification. Let's say circularity. Like a solution that seems so obvious to a lot of us is like, this is needing to happen. It should have happened like yesterday or whatever, but this is so obvious, the way forward. And I have them step into the shoes of their stakeholders and try to imagine what something that we think of as really exciting and positive and necessary, what might that bring up for them? So let's just take electrification and EVs. Okay, well, let's take a step back. What does it maybe bring up for people, what anxieties might be there. And so we spend some time with those 3 A's I talk about: anxiety, ambivalence, and aspiration. And I find that that in itself can be quite kind of an aha moment for people when they realize, like, oh, wow, I've been so focused on pushing my thing through. I haven't really been acknowledging where they might be coming from. So that's like kind of step 2. And then step 3 is then what do you do with that? And how do you begin to translate that into practices? And that's all the way from how you write emails, or how you communicate, or how you convene a meeting, how you convene an event, how you design a campaign. It can take lots of different forms, but that's where you really get into the application of this.
Well, I would love to be a wallflower, and I don't know if you've talked to a lot of different groups, but have you had a chance? Can you kind of read a room? Like, let's say you're talking to a group of, I guess, employees within an organization. It could be different sizes, have different responses, but can you tell pretty quickly, sort of, all right, some of the issues here, it's a leadership issue, or it's a mission issue because it's a mission that's very hard to sort of, measure success. I mean, do you figure that out pretty quickly?
Yeah, I think I have been able to. The more kinds of organizations I work with, and what I start to notice is, what's really interesting is, it almost doesn't matter what sector we're working in, whether it's a corporate sector, public sector, philanthropic, academic, NGO, government. Like, it's kind of interesting how a lot of the challenges that come up, they come up across these different worlds, and they may not know that about the others. But I've come to see that there's a humility, there's a humbling, where after working with, kind of what you would imagine would be the highest echelons of, organizations, you find that, wow, like, we're all figuring this out right now. And then you also find that there's the unexpected, profound wisdom and insight that is not where we would traditionally expect it, which is more grassroots, community based. The wisdom, the indigenous wisdom and practices of frontline communities that have been vulnerable and experiencing marginalization for generations. Like, so it's really kind of made me appreciate that, having that recognition that we're all just kind of figuring this out right now. And we're all kind of ideally at a place of being truly humble with what we know and what we don't know.
Well, and again, I wonder, like, the responses that you get. Maybe and I'm just visualizing maybe what a session's like. Can you just sort of, if everyone's sort of saying, well, you know what, I'm not experiencing any climate, anxiety with the work that we're doing, and it's pretty uniform through the organization, is you're sensing like, okay, well, they're not necessarily being honest here. Or then maybe another organization is just across the board, there's just lots of issues and such. And then, you go from there, right?
Yeah, I've never encountered an organization that isn't wrestling with all kinds of complex emotional factors of doing environmental climate work. I haven't really encountered that. What I do encounter primarily is working with organizations that are highly action oriented and solutions oriented, that are not able to see why we need to slow down and why we need to spend more time bringing people along with us. And that's the part that I find most challenging and confounding, in terms of where do I feel really like an edge or challenged by in this work. It's when, because really honest about it, I see this through the lens of how are we all managing our anxieties. We manage our anxieties in all kinds of ways. Some are more constructive than others, right? Um, but one strategy of managing high anxiety is by becoming overly focused on metrics, on impact, and proof, and it's like it's a style, it's a mode that I we need and I appreciate, but it can get in the way of the necessity we have right now to actually try some different things, to be more experimental in the way that we communicate and do the work we do when we're needing to get results very quickly. So I don't know. Does that make sense?
No, it does. It does. And, as we're getting toward the end of the episode here, I do want to have some time here about Project Inside Out. And this is the group that you formed. What are you doing with that?
So Project Inside Out is a hub. It's a resource hub that came about through a grant from the KR Foundation very generously. We're very grateful to KR for giving. This is an experiment. So how do you take tools, practices, and insights from the psychological world and translate them into resources for people working on the front lines of climate change, specifically around sustainable consumption? And so Project Inside Out is a distillation of work we did over a couple of years with a group of advisors and organizational partners: Green Faith, Global Action Plan, Beacon for Sustainable Living, One Earth. A number of partners came together and we worked to figure out what this might look like. And it looks like a lot of things. So we produced this about a month ago, launched this. You can go to the website, projectinsideout.net. You can sign up for a newsletter. It's really early days. It's really a pilot to see, to really advance, quite honestly, a new approach to doing our climate environmental work. And that approach we call being a guide. So, and that's a specific reference to the research and motivational interviewing in the public health sector, where people change, are more likely to change when we feel guided, as opposed to educated, cheerleaded at, or righteously moralized. That guiding kind of in a way brings all of that together, ideally, where you've got urgency, you've got some education and information, you've got the cheerleading positivity, but the emphasis with guiding is actually, we're in partnership. I care about you. I want to hear what you have to say. It's how to show up in a different way that gets us the results faster than we would if we do what we're used to doing.
So the launch was last month. How'd it go? Has it been since then? What's sort of been the response and such?
Oh, it's been amazing. Yeah, we had a great response, really successful. We had a summit in October. You can find the videos. We have a YouTube channel. I'll have to get the link over to you for that. But there's a lot of interest, and I think we're just at the edge of the next phase, and would love people to check us out, sign up, and get involved.
Okay, so just before I let you go, and what's next for you? We've got a new year coming up, and I'm sure 2021 is going to be a big year for you.
I'm proclaiming this is the year of my book.
Okay. Have you started it?
That was supposed to be 2020, but
okay.
but things got very busy. I've started it, and I'm going to be working on it over the holidays, and I'm really committed to getting the book together and out. That really distills a lot of this into format that is useful for people.
And so it's a lot of the topics that we discussed today. That's what you're going to be bringing into the book. So okay, fantastic. Well, Renee, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. I hope I get to talk to you. We've talked on the podcast, we've talked here now, and just love the work that you're doing. And I just keep seeing you everywhere on social media and people getting you invited to things. So I think that's fantastic. I want to take you into just chatting before I let you go, just a couple minutes just to close out this episode. But thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. And I love talking with you as well.
All right, just hold on. Hey there. We'd like to officially close out the episode. So that would be great. Any sort of additional resources? Like we have a wall for this, so people that come in, even after the fact to watch these videos, that they can go to the wall with the video. But any other additional resources, links to Project Inside Out and such, we'll definitely include in that.
Okay. I just sent you the YouTube
Oh,
link.
okay, perfect. Well, yeah, and you've got a bunch of great resources. You've got a TED Talk and all that too. So
Mhm.
just a bunch of things that we can include. Well,
Yeah.
so I don't want to keep you much longer. We appreciate you making the time for this. I know you just are you're like a bungee from one thing to the next, and I appreciate you getting your mind. And this is we want to definitely share the message and hopefully have you back on Simpatico and make things as easy as possible for you. And you see it as a platform to kind of generate these discussions. So it's certainly open and an extent invitation not only to Simpatico too, but this episode should be hopefully next couple of days we'll have it, and we'll share it on social media. But please, plant it somewhere where you think people could enjoy getting some.
I will. I'll definitely promote it as best I can. And I appreciate your having me on and having me on the podcast too. I think,
Oh, you know what? I just got a last minute. Let me get a question from the community room. Even though you're probably about to get at it, from Mike, you mentioned earlier some of the ways people dig in during times of crises, such as focusing on impact. I'm curious, can you delve into some of the ways that people oppose progress that needs to change? You need me to read that again?
yeah.
Okay, I did. You mentioned earlier some of the ways people dig in during time of crises, such as focusing on climate
Yeah.
impacts. I'm curious, can you delve into some of the ways that people oppose progress that need to change? And so, I guess people that are getting in the way of some progress.
Um, well, I don't know how to answer that because that is what's happening, that people are opposing progress. So, um, I mean, it shows up as minimizing the threat, discounting, projecting, blaming. These are all defense mechanisms
Right.
that people use to avoid feeling threatened and to avoid feeling vulnerable. And it's just what we do as humans. We just do it. Like we all do it, every one of us. So, what I try to encourage people to do is when people are digging in and opposing progress and threat, we've got to reframe it as what's the anxiety, what's the fear that's underlying that, and how do we address that? So if you look at like right wing kind of ideological political climate denial and it's even beyond denial. I mean, I see what Katharine Hayhoe deals with on a daily basis because she shares it with me. I'm in a Dropbox folder where she shares every single social media she gets that's directed towards her, that's hateful, that's violent, that's, insulting. And so, you have to ask with that, what's really going on? Like, what's the underlying fear, anxiety, and threat? And then you have to meet that. You have to address that. So I think that's the only way forward is that we find ways of having more open and honest conversations. And it's on us to take the higher road.
To her credit, I'm sure she just gets the most vicious stuff, and yet I don't know what she's like behind the scenes. We haven't had a drink, and like, what do you really think? But she's been able to keep such a positive persona, even
Mhm.
under the face of such vicious attacks. And so, good for her that
Yeah,
you just her presence is still very positive. So that's good.
yeah, definitely. Well, she's got also spiritual orientation. I'm sure that helps. You know,
It's a safe spot for her to go to for sure. Okay, no, I'm going to let you go now. But again, thanks, Renee, for coming on, and we will be in touch with just some follow up. But it's always a pleasure.
Okay. Sounds good. Take care, Doug.
All right, take care.
Yeah.
You can
Bye.
just sign out of StreamYard. Hey, everybody. Awesome. Renee is just truly in demand right now with what she's doing. It's always a treat to talk to her. I do want to just mention we got an upcoming episode at 7 p.m. Eastern with Kayla Hathaway, Ocean Circulation, Climate, and North Atlantic Nutrients. And then Lee Constable from Australia Climate Channel, researching school strike for climate and Australian youth attitudes. All right. Halfway through a very awesome day. Hopefully I will see you around.